are now 10 games into a championship season, and the QPR roller coaster is at warp speed. It seems no matter what the team does, they are only a few paces away from dire refereeing and diving Leeds players. Okay, we have somehow to calm down and summarise these last 3 games. Still managed to look forward to those up-and-coming games that we've got after the international break, and thankfully focus upon a few topics. My guest for this podcast is a regular contributor to posts on the Hoops and Dreams Forum, where he goes by the name of East 17. His real name is Andrew. Welcome.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah. Can you give me some idea of your background, Andrew, and why it ended up being QPR for you?
So I've been going to QPR since 75-76. Was the first year I went to QPR. My parents had separated and subsequently divorced, and my dad had me every other weekend with my other brother. And so one weekend he took us to Arsenal, and I didn't like it very much. My brother did. And then a couple of weeks later he took us to see Charlton, and neither of us liked it very much. And then he took us to see QPR, and we beat Wolves 4-2. And then went to my nan's afterwards and had crumpets and tea, and it was like, why would you not love this football club? Blue and white hoop shirts looked really cool. Near my nan, so I could always get something to eat afterwards. And they scored loads of goals. This was 75-76, remember? So Stan and Jerry, it was like, why would you not want to support this? And there you go. It's gone downhill ever since.
Okay. Well, let's quickly now, and rather painfully, review our last 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who can't remember or don't wish to remember, QPR against Coventry, we lost that one 1-3. And Leeds against QPR, we lost that one 0-1. And QPR against Blackburn, we lost... we lost that one just 4-0, wasn't it? So these league
just
results
4-0.
translate into 0 points, nil point, out of a possible 9. And our league position didn't change. We're still 22nd, but still on 8 points. There is no getting away from it. These are not the results we and the team wanted. No wins, not even draws. Your thoughts, Andrew?
So our problem is that there's a few problems. So where do we start with this? So all the best QPR teams that I've seen always have a strong spine through the middle of them. So they will have a strong goalkeeper, 2 strong centre-backs, 2 strong centre midfielders and a strong striker. So you've got 6 players there who you can hang your hat on and build everything else around them. You look at our promotion seasons, you look at the seasons we've gone back, in the dim and distant past, we had strong spine, and which allowed all the other stuff to happen. We haven't had a strong spine for a few seasons now, and there's been various failings. We've been changing goalkeepers, has been one. Our last goalkeeper was okay, but in front of him we didn't have a good solid centre-back pairing. So we've got a goalkeeper now who's actually doing quite well. He's got the 3rd highest saves in the championship, but he's also faced the 3rd highest number of shots, I think it is, or something like that. So we're not stopping the shots, and the reason being is because we're interchanging our centre-back pairing. So we're missing solid centre-backs. Our centre midfield is, without Sam Field, an absolute disgrace. And in the last 3 games particularly, some of the players need to look at what they've been doing and how they've been doing it. And up front, I love Dykes, I love Armstrong, but they ain't going to score 15 goals between them in a season. So where's the goals going to come from?
I can't argue with that. If we go quickly through the games, we were matching Coventry, and they're generous to a fault referee until half-time, despite all the fouls. But the second half saw the referee seemingly discover his card stored in some orifice or other. So from letting everything go without a card, we now had a second half with like a card spree. He just went berserk. And that coincided with some very poor defending by us. For me, their first goal was offside, and even though the assistant was in the right place to make the call, he chose not to do it. After that, we pressed forward and left ourselves more and more exposed, eventually shipping 3 goals before Parle's consolation goal in a game that we could have won, if truth be known. And I think Leeds was the reverse. That was a poor first half from the R's and a better second. But the damage had already been done by them with Kakai's poor pass, which led to the only goal. The only other notable events were Colback and Cook going off with injuries and Phil getting that final yellow. Plus Begovic getting his unbelievable red card as well. Bamford's diving is well known to us, so I was really surprised when the referee didn't recognise it for what it was. I know he subsequently said, no, I fell over as I was trying to avoid the goalie, but that was just a load of old cobblers. Again, though, in that match, there were some spells of good play by the R's, which brings us round to Blackburn and the resurrection of Begovic from the red card. That was the good news, and frankly, it was the only good news. The team performance was not as cohesive as previously we've had, but bizarrely, there were a lot more crosses and shots on target. But we did not score, as you pointed out. Blackburn had no such problems and made the most of a side that was at best patched up, being minus Field, Cook and Fox, which you quite rightly highlighted as their importance. Whilst equally lowly, Sheffield Wednesday drew with Huddersfield and Rotherham did the same at Southampton at the weekend, the R's imploded. There's not anything else we can say about that. And Gareth Ainsworth jumping up and down, he's only doing as much as we're doing, jumping up and down. So that brings us on to our next three fixtures, which are after the international break, as I mentioned, and we're after a prediction. So, horrible putting you on the spot, Andrew, but Huddersfield against QPR on the 21st of October. They are 19th on 11 points, so they're not that far off from us. Would you like to go for give us a win, draw or loss and give us a quick reason why?
I'd love to be able to predict it, but I honestly couldn't tell you because I don't even know if he's going to be our manager by then and what might happen. Realistically, it's that you would hope you would get a point, but I expect we won't get anything from it.
Yeah, it's interesting that because that's the one I've gone for a draw on. Not a win, a draw. At the moment we're in such uncertain times, I have no more optimism left. So that brings us round to West Bromwich against QPR. That's the midweek game on Tuesday the 24th. Now West Bromwich Albion are a lot higher than Huddersfield. They're 11th on 16 points. And they're running a mixed bag of, if you excuse the pun, mixed baggies of draws, wins and losses. What do you reckon, Andrew?
Again, all I can see at the moment on the basis of how we are is, like I said, hope for a point and expect a defeat. It's nothing more than that, really.
Yeah, I've got it down as a loss, I've got to admit. And that brings us further up the table. On Saturday the 28th of October, we host Leicester, who are obviously riding very high. They're top on 30 points. With 5 wins out of 5. Actually, it's 6 out of 6, if I remember rightly. What do you reckon, Andrew?
I can't see anything other than a defeat to that.
Nor me, sadly. I can't. Right, okay, let's move quickly on. As I said, I thought the topics might turn out to be the better part of this podcast. As I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, we're now 10 games into the season. So it's not quite 25% of the way through, but close enough perhaps to extrapolate our points tally and consider where we might be coming to at the end of the season. The points would be around 40 points if things stay the same. Is that enough for survival, Andrew?
No, 40 is not enough. No, we are short by at least half. We should have 15 points by now. More than that. I mean, we're 8 points. So, we should have potentially double of that by now. We're averaging too few points per game. You've got to have a minimum of a point per game. Otherwise, you've got no chance of point and a quarter per game, or you're not going to get anything. So the points tally we've not isn't enough, and stuff's going to have to change in one way or another, because the you look at points or performances. At the moment, I'd prefer points, but the performances have to change because you can blame whoever you want. You can blame the referees, you can blame the linesmen, you can blame whoever for the bad luck that we've been getting, but you're not creating the circumstances where you can score goals. We've got the lowest XG in the division, I believe. And I was never one to look at XG. I never really thought much about it. I thought it was just another stat that people were creating, but it just shows that how few chances we create. So we have to look at the chances we're creating. I had a look back at Leeds. We had 6 touches in their box, in the whole game, which is just appalling. The 6 possessive touches within their box is really poor. And you can have all the play all you want all the way around the outside of it, but if you're not doing anything with it in there, then what's the point?
Yeah, I can't argue that. I mean, no other side except Sheffield Wednesday has got as low a number of goals scored as the ours. In fact, only Sheffield Wednesday and ourselves have a goal tally that's still in single digits. Everybody else is in double digits.
Yeah. It's but this is the frustrations. This is what's frustrating me. Things like, for example, Chris Willock, attacking midfielder, didn't have a shot, against Coventry, which is really poor. That's really poor. If you're playing as an attacking midfielder, why aren't you getting a shot in? Now, you got to look at the way we're being set up, and are we getting the best? We look at how we got the best out of Willock and Chair last season. You play them as a pair behind a single striker. That's how they perform best. So almost a Christmas tree formation kind of thing, or 4-3-2-1, for example. Yeah. But that's not the style that we want to be played. So if you're going to be slinging crosses in, then you're going to bypass, Chris Willock having an opportunity to run at the defence. So, why pick him for the team if you're not going to play that way? So you've got to fundamentally think about, the way you're playing the game. And that's where I don't know if Ainsworth is doing that yet.
That's a very good question. We'll perhaps come on to that in a minute. Thanks to a series of spankings, as well as sort of not scoring that many goals, we've also got a high number of goals conceded, which truly does reflect where we sit in the league. But it is those lack of goals that have been, that should have been scored, that has dragged us into the relegation zone. Bizarrely, against Blackburn, we improved our opportunities of scoring, even at the risk of conceding, and the overall performances have not been one of surrender, which I absolutely hated last year to see us giving up. What we're seeing instead is a cohesive unit that is just malfunctioning. The finishing is absolutely dire. It really is. We've got 2 strikers who are both failing at the same time, sadly. I mean, normally you get one out of form and then the other, is in form. And we're just not seeing that. So 40 points may be all we end up with as things are at the moment. And that is a relegation number. There's just no getting away from it.
Yeah. As it stands at the moment, I wouldn't bet on us staying up if things stay as they are.
No. Okay, for those of you who haven't rung Samaritans yet, we'll go on to the second topic. Since Gareth Ainsworth has taken over, it's been a mixed bag of results, but mainly disappointing ones. So that's despite the improved team performances this season. Given our current league position and run of results, should the QPR board be starting to look elsewhere, Andrew?
So I've been having long conversations with my son about this, and I've been posting on message boards.
Is your son on the board?
No, my son has a first in sports science and coaching, so he understands the game fundamentally way above the level that I get, and so he's the best person to talk about this stuff with, and I have interesting conversations with him about it. So there's a couple of things that matter here. So who's going to be any better? Because we got rid of Critchley because Critchley couldn't do it, and we lost Beale because Beale went off to do something else. But even he was struggling at times. They were playing for him, but we weren't actually getting. We were getting results, but some of the performances were a bit on the ropey side. Warburton wasn't doing it. So we just go back through the list of managers. Which managers who, when we've sacked them off, have then we replaced with somebody better? And you can think back to Jim Floyd Hasselbank, and you can think back to Ian Holloway, and you can think back to all of the managers who've been and gone. there's very few who actually stand out as doing something better. And I know that people are going to go, well, just get Neil Warnock back in. Well, no, because Neil Warnock, when he was here before, had a ludicrous amount of money to spend, which he won't have this time round. That he left Huddersfield because, again, there was friction about, wanting him to stay and him wanting to have some power to spend money. So why would he come back to QPR where, his legacy is untainted to try and keep us up? When he's going to be told in January there won't be any money to spend. So who else is around? And I don't know enough other people who are around. What I'd be doing is trying to work with Ainsworth, at least for the next 3 months, and go, how do we make you better at your job? Because we do this in organisations. One of the things I do is I work with organisations on developing their people. And if you've got a manager who's not performing, you don't just sack him. What you do is you train them, you coach them, you help them understand what they need to do their job better and how they can be better at their job. And this short-term view of we sack the manager now and the hope that somebody else will come in. Well, we proved it last season with Critchley. It made no difference whatsoever. In fact, it probably made us worse. We played worse football under Critchley than we had done under Beale. Not to say we played better football under Ainsworth, but we got the few points that were needed in order to stay up. So if we were to bring somebody in, how can we be sure they're going to do any better? So what we have to do, I think, is keep on nerve. And if I was Amit Bhatia, I'd be desperately trying to find a senior professional manager to sit down and work with Ainsworth on, all right, so let's look at the coaching practice, let's look at the performances, let's look at the way you're interacting with the players, let's look at the media piece that goes around it, because these managers need some mentoring and support themselves. I'm not saying Les Ferdinand was the right person to be doing it, but noticeable that since we haven't got Les Ferdinand, he's left on his own. So who has he got in the club who he can talk to about this? He can't talk to Lee Hughes about it. He can't talk to the board about it because they're there for different reasons. So who has he got? He's probably feeling quite lonely at the moment. And I think he probably needs somebody to sit down and talk with. Now, if it then turns out and we get to December, so 6-8 weeks from now, and he's still not doing it, well, then fair enough. But you've still got time then in December to do something about it.
Right. Now, you've sort of jumped onto the question about the director of football, and I think that has got a lot to do with it. Soler's left for whatever reason. We're not quite sure why. Probably a large amount of that was due to the criticism of the fans, who really, I don't think even now I understood what he was doing, to be quite honest with you. Not fully understood it. We know that the club announced that they were going to go out and they were going to use a hiring company to filter through all of the various applicants or potential candidates, and they were going to use an analytical program or something to try and come up with the best person. All sounded good, but nothing's happened since. So if we'd have had the appointment of a director of football fairly early on after Soler's left, do you think that would have helped?
Almost certainly, because it would have been a person for Gareth Ainsworth to work with. Without having a director of football does make it problematic, but they're rarer than rocking horse poo. And finding the right candidate, to be able to do that, it's better that you get the right person after some time rather than the wrong person after a short time. And again, we can look at how the club's done this in the past. We've had the wrong people doing things, for a long time. So much better, I think, that they're doing it patiently, and we need to show some patience as fans. What we can't do is necessarily give Gareth Ainsworth a free pass, and he does have to understand that there are potential consequences. But like I said, he needs some support from somewhere. Now, whether that's a director of football or some paid for mentoring and coaching with somebody, or you get somebody in to work with him to help support him, I think that's what I'd be doing if I was Amit Bhatia.
Yeah, I can't argue with any of this. I mean, my feeling is that with the FFP restrictions that we've got there at the moment, the budget controls that are really restricting us, we can't afford to pay off Gareth. He's on a 3.5-year contract. So to pay him off and hire another person...
Are management costs included within FFP? I don't know if they are. I thought it was player salaries. If they're not, well, then it doesn't matter, in which case it can be traded over. If they are included, shorting his contract and stuff
it.
like that. Yeah, I mean, there will have to be a compensation payment, but that comes for negotiation, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like you in a way. I believe the board has got no choice but to support Gareth until at least the end of the year. We literally don't have enough funds to keep doing this, paying compensation. As you point out, we've had a fair few managers and not achieved that much from them, to be quite honest. I think we're going to have to stick with him for a little while. Had we brought in an experienced person as director of football in perhaps early September, I do feel that we would have helped Gareth Ainsworth. He would have been an extra pair of eyes, an extra source of wisdom. Someone who would fit that bill, I think, is Mark Warburton. But he was shown the door as our coach, and it would take a lot of humble pie to get him back. So I think that one's out.
I don't get the kerfuffle over Warburton. I don't understand. We played some good football with him, and then I went to some horrible games. I was in Barnsley away, raining straight in our faces, losing 1-0. I think we ended up with 2 shots on target. I mean, it was an atrocious game of football. And we had played some really poor football then. And so harking back to the days of Mark Warburton suggesting that things will all be wonderful and bright isn't necessarily going to work the same way. And like I said, I've watched QPR for a lot of time, a lot of years, and we were bad on Saturday. We were really bad on Saturday. But don't just assume that
the grass is
one
greener.
of the names from the past is going to instantly improve things. It doesn't work like that.
No, I think that he'd be a better director of football probably than he was as a coach. We'll see.
But again, why would he want to move? He's quite happy doing a very good job at West Ham and in the Premier League. So why would he want to move?
No, I can't argue with that. If we were to talk about the director of football, I think you're looking for a director of football who's got drive, experience, the ability to work not just with the current manager, but with future managers as well, and different people at the club. He or she, could be a she, needs to be almost a chief scout to get the best players in, a head strategist capable of building a vision for the club, and as you sort of intimated, a sounding board for the manager, but above all, probably a people person, and that's quite a tall order. Go on.
Yeah, it's so again. When I work with organisations, developing them and helping provide and work them through change. And there are 5 elements that sit within that. So if you're bringing a director of football in, first thing you need to have is absolute clarity over what aims, objectives and strategy are. Okay, so what's the strategy for this year? What's the strategy for 3 years? What's the strategy for 5 years? So you've got absolute clarity from the board down, so the person taking over that role understands it. Second thing you've got to have is really clear understanding of the relationships and structure within the club. So structure is important. So who is responsible for what and where does accountability sit? Because it doesn't feel like there is accountability. There is responsibility, and accountability is being left to the manager when that accountability should rest with the director of football or with the owners or wherever. And so there needs to be absolute clarity on who is accountable for what within the organisation, but also who needs to be informing who we need to be consulting with, whether that be with our suppliers, whether that be with our customers, whoever it happens to be. You need to be having those conversations. Then you need to look at your structures and systems. And so this is where you look at your coaching. You look at the way that you're bringing through from your youth academies and your kids and youth into B team and development squads and so on. What's the process for that? What are we setting as targets? Are we setting for a minimum of 2 players per season, for example? How do we put the things in place to make that happen? Then we look at the behaviour and skills. So then we go to and say, okay, well, what do I want as a director of football? Absolutely echo the point about, they need to be there as a sounding board, but also what are we expecting them to be able to do? The thing that's stopping it at QPR and the thing that stops it is the culture. So the culture is the worst behaviour that's accepted within the organisation. So if a behaviour is bad behaviour is accepted, other people can go, well, that's fine, we can accept that. Okay, so if a player comes in late for training and isn't balled out for it, other players can turn up late for training. If a board member can sit there and throw a drink down and walk out and go, this is rubbish, kind of thing, and is then not challenged over it, other people can think they can do the same. What we don't have is, I don't think there was a clear understanding of the culture that exists within the club. And this is one of the problems we've got that's been going on for years and years and years. We have this mix of cultures because you have these different people coming in at different times. And so saying to the organisation and saying to the manager, this is what we expect, and the manager then setting with the players, this is what we expect, and a director of football saying, this is what I expect, and Lee Hoos saying, this is what I expect, as minimums throughout the organisation. And when you have absolute clarity, so you wouldn't look at Manchester United, for example, and go, you don't, in terms of their culture, you wouldn't look at Leeds, you wouldn't look at Liverpool. These clubs have a culture where it's clearly recognisable. At QPR, our culture is an absolute cluster fudge. And that's the problem, because the poor behaviour that's sat there for year after year after year after year hasn't been picked up and challenged.
Do you think we should therefore regard Sir Les's appointment as Director of Football as a learning curve?
Entirely. So there was an opportunity there to shift and say, this is the way we did things, we now need to do things a little bit differently. And that wasn't happen. What we did is we got a continuation of what we always did. There's a fear that I had what we have was a kind of theatre. So we said things were going to be changing, but actually they stayed the same. But we could point at it and go, look, Director of Football, things are done differently here now. But actually nothing changed. It was still done the same way. Yeah. If you want to change things, you have to fundamentally shift those aims, objectives, relationships, behaviours, processes, systems to shift things on. And you have to change the culture at the same time. You can't change the culture in the playing squad, which I get absolutely what Gareth Ainsworth was trying to do. He's trying to shift the players on. He's trying to do them differently with the hacker and all those kind of things. He's trying to change that culture. But you can't do that in isolation from the rest of the culture that exists within the club.
Yeah, don't argue with that. I cannot argue with that at all. Just hope the club's listening.
If they want, they can always get in touch. My fees are cheap.
Right. I think if we'd had a Director of Football in place earlier on, it couldn't have made a negative difference. It must have been a positive difference if we'd have had one there. I'm sure of this. And if nothing else, it would have ensured that Gareth Ainsworth was not quite as isolated as he probably is now. Our time is now up, and it's just remains really for me to say thank you very much to my guest Andrew for joining me on this podcast. Much appreciated. My editor Dave, and of course all of you for watching. Do click on subscribe if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, and do add a comment or two below if you can. We'd really appreciate it. We will try and respond. I am Brian Fisher, and this has been a Hoops and Dreams QPR podcast. Come on, you R's.
We know who we are. You know who we are. We are QPR.